You're watching Hockey North. Anastasia Bucsis here. I'm home in Calgary, but guess what? There's so much to talk about. Karissa Donkin, you were on the ground in Halifax for the international break, the Rivalry series. Let's start there, buddy. How did it go? Give me the goods.
Yeah. Well, I've never had a bad trip to Halifax, first of all. Great city. Always lovely to be there. And I feel like there was just like a vibe in the city, like a women's sport vibe. I got to go to the Halifax Tides training camp as well, and then the rivalry series game. So it just felt like people were excited about women's sports when I was there. And the crowd was insane, I thought. And the moment when Blair Turnbull scored, like I just felt so happy for her to have that moment, like to be quarantined, sitting in a hotel room in 2021, waiting to play in her home province for Worlds. Doesn't happen, unfortunately. She never thought she was going to have this moment, and then to score that big goal at home. Obviously, they didn't win the game, but that was just such a cool moment to see.
Yeah, shout out to the Maritimes, eh? They know how to throw a good party, and they're such good women's sports fans. So, Maritimes, we love you. Let's take a look at the standings. All three of the Canadian teams kind of sprinkled throughout. Karissa, what have their stories been up until this point?
Yeah, I think we have to talk about Montreal first of all. I mean, they've just been, I feel like, kind of unstoppable lately. And the story hasn't, I mean, obviously, part of the story is Maddie Philippe Poulin leading the league in goal scoring. But the real story for me in Montreal this season is just the depth. So that was an issue I think that kind of hurt Montreal in the playoffs last year, is that lack of forward depth. Obviously, they had some injuries too, but that's been the big difference for Montreal this season. And then when we look at Toronto, like, things have shifted for them in the standings. Then they get Natalie Spooner back, and just, you really noticed having her size in front of the net, just her ability to kind of take the goalie's eyes away. Like, I think she made an impact right away. And I'm sure just morale wise too, having somebody like Natalie Spooner back on the bench, out on the ice, I think it would make a huge difference. So it also just shows like how quickly things can change with the 3 points for a regulation win, right? I mean, Toronto's sort of leapfrogged. I mean, first they leapfrogged Ottawa, and now they've leapfrogged New York. So
You mentioned Natalie Spooner. I mean, the triumphant return of Spooner. We could talk about that all day. She's injected so much momentum, but I would be remiss, of course, to not ask about the loss of Sarah Nurse in the rivalry series. Just a devastating blow for Team Canada, for the Scepters. What do you think perhaps the future of the international break may look like, or the rivalry series in particular? Like, with a big star getting injured like that, are we at a time where we're starting to reimagine what these breaks look like? Especially, we're seeing best on best hockey all the time with the PW.
yeah, it's a good point, and I totally get that argument. And if I'm a Toronto Raptors fan, I don't like that one bit. That Sarah Nurse goes out and gets hurt in a game that honestly, really in the grand scheme of things doesn't mean a lot. And now they're going into a really important stretch for the team, and they don't have one of their best players. Like, that really sucks. But I think it's not going to look the way that it does now. So we know going into the Olympics next year, what Gina Kingsbury told me is that they're going to have training blocks. So some of them might be before the season starts, some of them might be during the season, but they might not necessarily be games per se. They might just be opportunities for national teams to get together ahead of the Olympics. So maybe we'll see kind of national team windows similar to like what we see in women's soccer. I think it has to continue to exist in some form, but is this the end of the rivalry series as we know it? I tend to think probably yes.
Ooh, hot take. Yeah, I do think that there needs to be a reimagining of those international windows, though. And you said it correctly. I mean, the FIFA breaks, how soccer works, friendlies, whatnot. I think that perhaps is a conversation that can really start to be enriching with, yeah, just how you grow the game. Talking about growing the game, you did something fun, and you made an all-century lineup for women's hockey at the Olympics. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so this was kind of fun. Our friend Jesse at the buzzer did the same for the men in the NHL, best NHLers at the Olympics. So I decided to try my hand at the women's side. And let me tell you, Anastasia, it was hard. But here's what I came up with. I mean, the obvious name I think that comes to everybody's mind is Maddie Philippe Poulin. Nobody has scored more when it matters most. No man, no woman, nobody than her. And if I had to pick an all-century player at the Olympics, I would pick her. She's there's no question. I also went with Jana Hefford up front. She scored, I think, probably the most meaningful goal in Olympic women's hockey history in 2002, that game winner. And that gold medal really changed women's hockey in Canada. And then I also picked Haley Wickenheiser, the leading scorer MVP in '02 and in 2006 as well. And, just somebody who still to this day holds the points record for women in a Canadian jersey. It's a record that I think is going to be hard for anybody to ever beat. So I think she's got to be up there. And then on the back end, this is where it got tricky for me, Anastasia, because I think there are a few good options here. I went with Jocelyn The Rock. I think, she has just been an anchor on the back end for the 2014 Olympics, 2018, 2022, and then she's in contention in 2026 as well. And then for that last spot in the back end, I really struggled between Colleen Sestorix and Becky Keller. And in my mind, the two of them kind of blend together a little bit because they both have that triple gold from '02 to 2010. I think they even retired on the same day. So I lean toward Becky Keller just because of her longevity. And then finally in net, I went with Kim St. Pierre. And to me, she was a no-brainer. I mean, when I think of, Canada's sort of conscience in net during those 4 back-to-back gold medals, like during that era of dominance for Canada, I think of Kim St. Pierre, who's got the 3 gold medals to her name. No-brainer for me. So that's what I went with, but I'm interested to hear what you think, Anastasia.
I don't know if there's ever going to be a perfect answer, because how do you find a place for Carolyn Ouellette? Where's Cassie Campbell? Colleen Sestorix, big shout out, the pride of Kennedy, Saskatchewan. All right, it's a town of about 200 people in southeast Saskatchewan. My personal opinion for D, I think Catherine Ward is probably the most underrated defender of all time. But I mean, I want to hear what our viewers say about this lineup. Who would you put on your all-century lineup? Because we could have this conversation all day, and it's super fun. You're the best, Karissa. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, man. Always good to talk to you. Have fun in Calgary.
I am. I'm happy to be home. But guess what? CBC's next game is February 15th. The Montreal Victoire are hosting the New York Sirens and Sarah Fillier. You can watch that all on CBC and CBC Gem.